Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webcast. I'm Matt Simon from the Marijuana Policy Project, and today we're going to be talking about the newly published Vermont General Election Voter Guide and the larger question of will Vermont legalize marijuana in 2017? So, starting with the larger question, I think there are really three very important factors that will affect the odds of legalization happening next year. First of all, ballot initiatives appearing on the ballot in other states are going to be a factor in this. Massachusetts and Maine are two of the 5 states that will be voting on binding referenda this November that would legalize marijuana for adult use and create a regulated market. So we talked to a lot of legislators this year who were uncomfortable with Vermont going first. They were afraid Vermont would be going it alone. But a lot of those same legislators felt that if Massachusetts passed its initiative, that Vermont, they were much more comfortable with the idea of Vermont doing it, knowing that other New England states were going to be moving forward. Maine will also be on the ballot. Both of those we're confident will pass. Neither is a sure thing, but we're confident in both of them. And those would certainly help our case in Vermont. Of course, there's nothing we can do about Massachusetts and Vermont if you live in Vermont, unless you have friends in Massachusetts and Vermont. Hopefully you'll encourage them to vote in favor. The second factor is that the legislators in the Vermont House and Senate need to work out their differences. We found during the session that there were some different ideas of what a legalization bill should in fact look like for Vermont. And so to that end, they formed a committee, a committee called the Joint Committee on Justice Oversight, agreed to meet 6 times this fall to study the issue and to try to come together on a plan that legislators could agree would be good policy for Vermont. And they actually had their first meeting last Monday, pretty much a full day meeting, and they have 5 more planned. The next meeting is Friday. And if you're interested in learning more about that, or if you want to ask to testify, or if you want to contact the members of this committee, this is a good time for them to hear from people. So feel free to email me if you'd like that contact information, or find it on the Vermont Legislative website. Again, the Joint Legislative Committee on Justice Oversight. So the big third thing, obviously, is that we need the right people to get elected in November that are willing to actually do this. So that is why we spend the time that we spend sending surveys to all the candidates, publishing a detailed voter guide for their responses, and promoting that to voters. So the voter guide. I'm going to share my screen with you so we can be looking at the same thing. Okay. Bear with me just a moment. I think we should be good here. All right. It's the front page of the voter guide. And certainly there are 2 very key races at the top of the ticket. Well, the presidential race is at the very top, but the top of the Vermont ballot. Sue Minter is the Democratic candidate for governor. She said very clearly that she supports legalization, that prohibition is a failure. And her opponent, Phil Scott, has said that he does not support legalization. This is a big contrast, and probably more than any other single question really matters as to whether or not we're going to be able to finish the job next year. With Sue Minter as governor, we think we have a very good chance of passing a legalization bill. And with a governor, Phil Scott, we would be less optimistic. Not to say that we would give up. We would make a strong push in the House and Senate, but it would be a tougher climb with Phil Scott as governor. In the lieutenant governor race, similar dynamic and perhaps an even stronger contrast between the candidates. Randy Brock is a former state senator who voted against medical marijuana dispensaries. When he ran for governor in 2012, he was a strong opponent of decriminalization. He said it sends the wrong message to children. And now he's running for lieutenant governor as a Republican, and he is strongly opposed to legalization. The Democratic nominee is one of our longest time allies in the legislature. David Zuckerman has been talking about marijuana policy reform since he first ran for the state house back in 1994. And he's been in the legislature for most of the last 20 years. He was the sponsor of the medical cannabis bill that became law back in 2004. And he's been involved with efforts to improve that. He sponsored decriminalization and legalization bills, and has just really been an all-around champion and on these issues. So to have David Zuckerman as lieutenant governor presiding over the Senate would be an advantageous position for us, certainly. MPP has formally endorsed both of those candidates, and we strongly encourage you to support them in November. I'm going to bounce to the Senate page. As you know, we've already passed a legalization bill through the Senate this year and had 17 votes for that. And it looks good for next year that we would not lose any support. And then in fact, we may gain support. One race I would highlight is in Franklin County. We have two incumbent senators here at the top of the page. The two Republican incumbents both voted against reform this year. And there is a former senator, Sarah Cattell, who's running for her old seat. And she has responded yes to all three of our survey questions. So the three questions being support for legalization of personal possession, support for legal home cultivation, and support for a legal regulated market. So she's on board with all three of those, and if she were able to win this, that would give us, it would replace a no vote with a yes vote, and it would also send a message, I think, to the whole Senate that this is an issue voters are ready for, and that being a prohibitionist does not help you win elections in Vermont. It's an important message to get across. There are a lot more interesting races on the House side. And as you know, the House was, if you followed this year, very much closer and less support there. So I'll start in Addison County and just flag a few of these races that are potentially really high impact. So in Addison 3, candidates have voted no. The two incumbents and the Republican candidates are all no, but there is a Democrat running who is favorable and on the record, and that's Frank Langrock. In Addison 4, Representative Dave Sharp is chair of the Education Committee and a strong supporter on this issue. But the other representative in Addison 4, Fred Baser, has been a no vote. So if Fred Baser were to lose that seat to the other Democrat running, which is Marie Cords, that would be a big one vote pickup for our issue. So that's Bristol, Lincoln, Moncton area of Addison County. And then in Addison 5, there's another one. There's Representative Harvey Smith, who's been a no vote on everything, voted no on decrim back in 2013. And he has a challenger in Tabori Brule, who's working hard trying to win this race. So that would be another really big swing if Mr. Brule were able to upset Representative Harvey Smith in Addison 5. Scrolling down, there are many races here that you'll see contrasts, and I don't want to bore you by trying to talk about all of them. If we come down to Franklin County, see several. So here's one in Franklin 3-1. And so in 3-1, we have one Republican and one Democratic representative who are incumbents running for re-election, and they've both voted no on the legislation this year. There's a former representative, Mike McCarthy, who's running to get his old seat back, and he has been generally more favorable on marijuana policy issues. He hasn't committed to supporting legalization on our survey, but he was a co-sponsor of the decrim bill, and we believe he would be a more favorable option than the two incumbents. One of these two incumbents is Corey Parent. He's one of the legislators who was photographed drinking champagne at the State House during the debate, or during a break from the debate on the marijuana bill this year. So and one more I want to feature is in Franklin 7, Enosburg. Representative Larry Fisk was a no vote on everything this year, and former Representative Cindy Weed is running to get her old seat back. She's been a consistent yes vote on decriminalization, and she did respond to our survey supporting legalization of possession and limited home cultivation, and being at least undecided and open-minded on the question of a legal market. So, ending the screen share, I do have a few questions that came in. Thank you, Dave Silberman, for asking questions, and others are welcome to ask questions in the chat box. The first question: in addition to voting for reform candidates, what can individual supporters do to help? Well, the next step above voting is to actually volunteer for one of these candidates. That really sends a message to them that you care about this issue and makes them feel good about their choice to be on the right side of it. And some of these state rep races are going to be decided by really likely a small handful of votes. So any votes that you're able to get for these people in addition to your vote can be tremendously valuable. We have plenty of time before the November election if you would like to write a letter to the editor of the local paper and say something positive about a candidate you support, whether it's they voted correctly this year and you want to bring that to people's attention, or they've taken a positive position, whatever that is. Your public endorsement of a local candidate can be obviously more impactful than your single vote for that candidate. And beyond directly helping candidates, the Vermont Coalition to Regulate Marijuana is actively trying to build a more robust grassroots campaign. So we do have two part-time organizers, grassroots coordinators working in the state. Matthew Tolley lives in Burlington. Ed Bank is in the southern part of the state. He lives in Grafton. And they've been going around to various events and holding a clipboard, getting people to sign up for emails, talking to people about the issue, having a presence. But we need to expand that presence. So anytime there's a candidate forum in your area, this will happen more and more with each passing week as we get closer to the election. There will be opportunities for the candidates to meet voters, to say what their about. And those opportunities are opportunities for us as well. If somebody goes to that candidate forum and asks a smart question, makes an intelligent comment, raises the issue in a thoughtful way, that can have a positive impact in many ways. First of all, it can get candidates on record if they aren't already on record. It can give favorable candidates a chance to say something smart in a room full of voters and usually media. So this can get reported, and for $0 spent, you can be in the local paper for asking a smart question, and you can get your favored candidate in the paper saying something smart on this issue. And it can educate the voters who are in the room as well. We need everybody in the state of Vermont to. The people who already support this need to support it more strongly. The people who are against it need to have their support lessened and need to move closer to undecided and hopefully eventually favorable. But we're always trying to educate on all fronts, educating the legislature directly and educating voters and using the media, all of the above strategy for raising this issue. We know that our opponents will do that. We know that our opponents will publish letters to the editor arguing for maintaining prohibition and against electing our favored candidates. So we need to counter that, and it needs to be as much of a real grassroots, people all over the state doing it thing as possible. The second question was specific candidates in tight races who would benefit from small financial contributions. I have not studied the candidate's financials situation well enough to know necessarily who's spending how much and what those battles are. But I would say that all the candidates I mentioned going through the Senate and House voter guide, small contributions, candidates appreciate your vote and your support. They very much appreciate when you offer to volunteer. And right there with volunteering is if you give them even $10 or $20, they're really grateful for that. And it's it's if you feel like doing that, certainly I mentioned the Franklin County Senate race, Sarah Cattell. I mentioned several races in the House in Addison County, from Frank Langrock to Bori Brule, Representative Dave Sharp, Marie Cords, all would be candidates in potentially close races who it would make a big difference if they're able to win. And all the candidates I mentioned in Franklin County for House as well. So former Representative Cindy Weed, former Representative McCarthy, two opportunities we have there. So the study committee is meeting Friday. Like I said, they're going to talk about primarily medical marijuana issues this Friday. That's been one of the other positives in this. A lot of people feel like this year was a disappointment, and it was. We did not achieve our main goal. At the same time, there was a tremendous amount of education that happened in Montpelier, and one of the things that legislators learned is that cannabis is really helpful for patients, and that includes many patients who cannot qualify under Vermont's stringent medical marijuana law. So the legislature actually did pass a bill that made some improvements there. They changed the 6-month requirement to 3 months, that you have to have a relationship with your doctor before he can certify you, he or she, and made some other changes, changed the standard from severe pain to chronic pain, a few other minor changes, but there's an interest in talking about broader changes. It's still easier to get oxycodone or Percocet, get a prescription for opioids in Vermont than it is to be certified. So there's one of the things they're talking about, and that'll be the emphasis Friday. How does Vermont's medical marijuana law work? How could it be improved? And how would adult use legalization fit in to, or how would the existing medical program fit into adult use legalization. It's something that was talked about during the session and the bill did account for, but it's one of the many areas of policy that they're looking to learn more about. And so that's on tap for Friday. The agenda's just been posted, and that will be in Montpelier. If you want to attend, it's in room 10, Friday, September 3rd, beginning at 10 a.m. They'll run from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. talking about cannabis and the Joint Legislative Justice Oversight Committee. So finally, I wanted to mention, we mentioned at the beginning about ballot initiatives in Massachusetts and Vermont. And one of the very common comments I see online, both on the Vermont Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Facebook page and also on various media organizations' pages whenever something's posted about marijuana legalization, somebody will say, we should just put it on the ballot. This needs to be on the ballot. Voters should decide. Well, if you live in Massachusetts, Maine, California, Arizona, or Nevada, that is in fact happening this year. If you live in Vermont, or for that matter, New Hampshire, Connecticut, or Rhode Island, and about half of the United States, it's simply not an option. You would have to amend the Vermont Constitution in order to make it so that laws could be changed by ballot initiatives. As to whether that's a good idea, that's another conversation. I'm not going to weigh in on that. There would be pluses and minuses potentially to doing that. But it's a much more difficult process to amend the Vermont Constitution to allow ballot initiatives than it is to simply pass a bill through the legislature. So there was an attempt to put a non-binding referendum on the ballot this year, and I think some people misunderstood that as actually having a ballot initiative that would change the law. A non-binding referendum would not change anything. It would be little more than a formal poll of the state's voters, and it would not be binding in any way. The representatives and senators would still have to develop and pass a bill. It would have to pass the House and Senate and be signed by the governor. There is no way around that process. So I hope that people who are commenting will attempt to understand the actual process that we have to follow. It's the process we had to follow to get medical marijuana. It's the process we had to follow to get decrim in 2013. I think we've proven that it can work. It has worked, and I'm very confident that it will work, particularly if we elect a governor who's willing to sign this bill and a lieutenant governor who's willing to champion this bill, and representatives and senators in some of these key races would certainly help as well. So that's my comment on that. Does anybody have any more questions? Let me just look at my email. I see no questions in my inbox. I see no more questions in the chat room. If you watch this after the live broadcast and you have questions, please feel free to email me, msimon@mpp.org. If you're not already doing so, please follow the Vermont Coalition to Regulate Marijuana on Facebook and on Twitter, Regulate VT, and sign up for our emails if you're not already. We need all hands on deck for this push. We can get this done and finish the job next year with your support. So thanks very much. I'm going to sign off now and have a wonderful afternoon.